Welcome to another lesson of land appraisal in Israel. This lesson actually is going to be one of the most important lessons when it comes to being a land appraiser, because in order to appraise land, you have to give a value, whether it's land or it's an apartment. The only way you can go about giving a value to it is to know what people are willing to buy for it. That's how we get our information. And this lesson we're going to discuss where are the sources, basically the mekorot meida, the information sources of getting reliable information of what actually is being sold in the market, and what's going on in the market. That's the only real way of basing your valuation on anything that's in the free market. So, for better or for worse, the answer to that question of where we get information is only one source, and that source is the Israel Tax Authority, Reshut HaMisim. I got to this website through typing Reshut HaMisim Meida Nadlan, and this will take you to the website I just saw, and this is what you come and see. This is really the source of all the information. Now, I say for better or for worse because the fact of the matter is that first of all, you can surmise that why is the Israel Tax Authority the one in charge of the data regarding land sales? The main reason is because they're the ones who are there at the forefront dealing with the transaction. A person sells the property. The main thing that needs to be done when he sells the property is collecting all the different taxes. So, in a sense, they're just chosen by default, since they're the ones that are processing the information. They were also chosen, therefore, to be the storehouse of the database of the transactions. In reality, though, that's not very good, because you can't expect them to do the job that, say, a land appraiser or a statistician would do, which is a meticulousness to the details. What's been shown to be currently is that a large amount of the information in the database, if a large amount of the information of every individual transaction has some kind of mistake in it in some way or another. So I think the point that the Mevaker Medina said, maybe even 70-80% of the transactions that are listed on the Reshut HaMisim, which again is the only one and only central database of sales in Israel, 80% of them have some kind of mistake in the information, whether it's what we'll see in a second, all the various types of parameters and criteria and fields that are listed. There's always some mistake there, which is a problem. Because of that, it's necessary, first of all, to broaden your scope, to base yourself on a larger number of transactions and not to focus just on the singular ones, which can be what's called outliers or exceptions to the rule. And the second problem is that you have no other source to cross-reference to be able to get any kind of a verification of whether it's true or not true, and that's a serious drawback in Israel. Hopefully one day they'll correct it. The problem has been documented, and there was an attempt to create other websites that would be better and more verifiable, but in essence, nothing's really taken off, and we're stuck with Reshut HaMisim. There is one other source of land values that you can get, and that is the land administration, which maybe if I have time I'll briefly touch on it at the end of this video. But the land administration is really the value you'd get there is for their auctions. That they always published their auctions of pure land to developers, and by looking at the auctions and seeing how much did a developer pay for a particular plot of land, you can get a sense of what the land value is. That, of course, each of these sources really caters to a different purpose. If you're an average Joe and you want to find out the value of an apartment or a house, you're certainly going to want to turn to Reshut HaMisim, because you're going to want to know the value as it's being sold now with a building built. If you're interested in just the pure land value as it is nowadays, absent the building on top of it, absent any other things that are connected to it, then you would, of course, it's better to turn to Reshut HaMisim and try to calculate the value based on the winning auction prices from the developers. That's not to say that you can't. There is no possible way to use one for the purpose of the other, but it's already going to be indirect. So for the most part, you're going to be using Reshut HaMisim, and that's what a lot of other websites, for example, Madlan. Madlan is really, it was I should really type this in the right way first. This is the website madlan.co.il. This is really a great website for the average Joe. You basically type in your address of whatever you're interested in. Let's just say Abraham Stern, Yerushalayim. And it'll give you two things. It'll give you, number one, all current offers for apartments in this area or in this neighborhood. And number two, these are right now are muda'ot, these are postings. If you go down to Iskaot Achronot, though, they'll also give you the actual sales that have already taken place and been sold. This section of Madlan, Iskaot Achronot, is again based on Reshut HaMisim. So that basically, if you want to get to the source of the information, you go to Reshut HaMisim. The nice thing about Madlan, though, is that in addition to sales that have already been taken place, you also can look at the muda'ot, the postings, the classifieds of what's being sold, what the offerings are, what's being asked for, so you can also get an additional idea of what's going on. But we're going to limit ourselves to Reshut HaMisim now. So if you're doing the Reshut HaMisim, this is how you go about doing it. You can do a search either by way of, you can do a search of one of two ways. For some reason also, I don't know why, but sometimes you get this window for the search, and sometimes you get a different window for the search. It's completely arbitrary, I don't know why. So you may get a different level of different window, but it's essentially the idea that you can do a search either by, city and street and address, or you can go by way of Gush V'Chelka. Let's do Gush V'Chelka because it's just easier to hone in on something. Let's say Gush 4524. And I'll just leave it at that, 4524. And again, keep in mind that because, like we said, there's a lot of mistakes in the database for Reshut HaMisim, so it doesn't really pay to be too narrow in your search. Because, for example, we'll see in a second right now, the Sug HaNeches, you can choose a residential or farmland or klali. So, okay, you'll choose residential, and then within residential, you can choose, if you want Dirat Gag, a rooftop apartment, or a garden apartment. So I would suggest that even if you're interested in only a rooftop apartment, you should still check everything, because again, there may be mistakes in the writing, and therefore it may register as a rooftop apartment, but it actually is not. So that's your choice. But I'll just right now choose for Hakol. Any type of residential unit is what I want to show up. And when it comes to, let's say, the Ta'arich HaIska, the interval of date, let's just say the past 36 months. Okay, make it easy. And you can skip this part. This is extra parameters of the values or the number of rooms or the shetach. We'll skip that, and you always have to put in a security code, which makes this very cumbersome. Every time you want to do a search, you have to put in a security code. So you can see already that it's not a very friendly interface. But unfortunately, it's the only interface. Okay, so it found nothing for me. It found nothing for me in that gush. So we'll have to broaden it to something. Let's just do Yishuv. Let's just stick with what we had of Abraham Stern. Maybe that'll be better for us. I'll do the Abraham Stern. Stern, Abraham. We'll leave it at that. And we'll leave everything else the same. 8548 is my security code. And there's too many, more than 450 iskaot. It's too many. Okay, so let's make it a little bit less. Let's make the past 12 months. 0341. Okay, I have 67 entries. And this is the first initial short list of it. Now again, it would be wonderful if they gave you the option of being able to export this to an Excel file, but they don't. And I don't know why they don't, but they don't. Probably because they don't really care. Because it's the Reshut HaMisim. They're interested in taxes. They don't really care about helping a land appraiser figure out things. So each of these is just a snapshot of a particular transaction. And then you have to click on each individual one to get the full picture, which again makes it very cumbersome because each one needs to be clicked on separately and looked at. Let me show you some things that especially can throw you off. This one right here. this on the right here. So it tells you the gush v'chalka, it tells you the day of the transaction, it tells you the money that was paid, but you'll notice that here what was sold was only a half of an apartment, not 100% of the apartment. So that if I asked you what was this apartment sold for, it's not 720,000. Actually, it's these two transactions combined, and it was actually sold for about 1.44 million shekel in total. And that's relatively easy to calculate by looking at it. But if you come down to the one over here, look at this one. 0.833 was sold at the apartment for 891. So when you click on it now, you see that the number has changed, because this number represents 100% of the apartment having been sold, even though what we saw earlier was just only a 83% of the apartment was sold. So let's just look at this a little bit further. So you have here the gush v'chalka, which again, for some reason, they add extra numbers into the gush v'chalka, and I don't really know why. It's messy. The address is 55 Shteren. This was what was paid for it. This is the shetach. The shetach are known as 51. The shetach rashum, which means the tabo, is 51. Not all the time do you have both of these fields filled, and not all the time do these two fields even corroborate to each other. They may not be identical, and not all the time even are the two numbers here the actual truth of the story. This, for example, just it could be that the shetach here in the tabo is 51, but they recently expanded, and it was actually 75 square meters. So that the 1 million here that was paid, you're thinking as a mathematician, you would say, okay, so we just do a simple mathematics, and you say divide 1.07 divided by the 51 square meters. Say, oh, I see here that the going rate there is about 21,000 per square meter. When in actuality, that's not necessarily true, because if I were to tell you that in actuality there was 70 square meters to this apartment that was paid, then the value per square meter is a lot less. And as a land appraiser, you have to go and check that out to make sure that in fact this is actually a reliable picture of what was being paid for. How do you go about checking that? So partly you can go and actually go physically check it, but also this is where the GIS comes in. Use the GIS. You take a look at number one, Tatzlumei Avir, the aerial images of the property to see and measure to see if anything was expanded, or you do a search through the building permits. Also, by way of the GIS, you go search building permits to see, has there been anything on record that has been expanded there? It's quite possible a person got a building permit expanded, but just didn't update Tabo, so that when the sale was done, it says that the apartment is 51, but in actuality it's really 75. And the best way to verify that is by searching for the building permits, and that'll give you the building permits will give you the true picture of what the apartment was sold for. So that's in a nutshell how you as a land appraiser get information about the value of properties. This is the main source of using Reshut HaMisim, collecting the data, filtering it, analyzing it, sorting out the ones that are really crazy kinds of transactions, and then coming to a general average and consensus of what's the average value per square meter in that neighborhood, and then using that as a multiple for whatever you're dealing with. Okay, hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.